In this video, I'm going to show you how to draw a furry animal. And I'm going to use my friend Molly's dog named Arlo. And I've got Arlo over here, over my shoulder. He's on the computer there. And he's already, I already added a grid on top of that photo, and I did that through an app on my phone. And I showed you that on a different video. So in this video, I'll be showing you how to enlarge the drawing, how to enlarge the photo and make it into a drawing on a sheet of paper. And you can see that I drew 4-inch grids on this paper, and I measured down 3 inches from the top, 3 inches from the sides, and then 5 inches up from the bottom. We're going to, after you get the drawing on the paper, we're going to be shading it using a variety of different techniques. Yes, we're going to be doing some smudging. I know you've all been waiting for this. I just made up some graphite powder, and we're going to be using some different tools for smudging too. Now, you may have gotten a drawing kit that included one of these, and maybe you're wondering what it's for. And this is called a tortillon. That's the fancy French term for it. And what it is really, it's a rolled up piece of paper that you use to roll a piece of cardboard you use to blend. Okay, and it's very handy, but if you don't have one, don't worry about it. You probably have some Q-tips at home. So if you don't have a tortillon, you can certainly use some Q-tips. For shading and blending large areas, you're going to want to use maybe a nice tissue. Make sure it's not the kind that has lotion in it. That's really nice for your nose and not so nice for drawings. You also may want to just have a paper towel too. Now I'm going to show you how to enlarge a photo with a grid. Please keep in mind that I've sped this up 2 times as fast as I normally draw. When I'm enlarging with a grid, I think a lot about fractions. I think about where the shapes intersect the lines of the grid, and I'm always asking myself, is it halfway? Is it maybe a third of the way up? Is it a quarter of the way up? And I look a lot at negative spaces. At this point, I really want to block in the big shapes, so I'm trying to ignore the details. I also wanted to get the focal point down first, which is the nose and the face. Now watch as I draw an axis for the eyes. The eyes are a little bit tilted. Then I'm going to also, just lightly sketch in the eye, looking at how far it is from the grid line. Now I'm sketching in the central axis of the face, which is always at a right angle to the axis of the eyes. Whenever you're drawing a face, it's really, really important to put the axis for the eyes on, and also the axis for the center of the face. Okay, so as I'm moving down here, I'm just placing the tongue, looking at the shape of it, and now I'm going to work on the outside edge of Arlo's face. I'm looking at where it is in relationship to the grid. And here I'm blocking in the shape of his head. Now he has a lot of fur, so I'm just looking at the basic angles that I see. That was the angle of the rug that he's sitting on. And here I see a little shape for his chin underneath his bottom lip. Now I'm looking at the bandana, and I'm looking at how far it is over from the side of the grid and how far down it comes in that square. So I've just blocked out the shape of the bandana, the rest of the side of his body. Now I'm really, really focusing on the negative spaces as I'm drawing the rest of the outline of Arlo and his toy bunny. So you see how I just drew that negative space, which is the rug in there? And then that's the side of his belly there that I can kind of see. Now I'm looking at the shape of his hind leg and where that is on the grid and how that comes over there. Now the back of Arlo came down a little bit higher than halfway on that back, that vertical line there. So I was looking where the foot was, and I just drew a quick vertical to see where that foot was in relationship to his hip. Now I'm laying in some lines because I'm going to put the floorboards on there. I like the perspective of the floorboards, and it gives the drawing a feeling of depth. So I'm lightly placing those orthogonals in there. Now I'm going to get the rest of the rug in, looking at the negative space of the floor on the left and where that comes in relationship to the grid lines. At this point, I'm blocking in the bunny, and again, just really looking at the shape of the negative spaces. So that comes around. And you see where I'm putting little marks, and then the edge of the bunny is there. So I'm always putting marks on the grid lines where the shapes come in relationship to the squares. Is it like a quarter of the way down, half of the way down? Again, I'm looking at the negative space around that bunny's head. And there, it's kind of hard to see the arm of the bunny and where it is. I've got that blocked in. That's the edge of Arlo. And here I see some darkness between his two front legs. That's a little bit of his chest that I was blocking in there. That's the bunny's nose, trying to get that in the right spot. And then you saw how I drew the axis even between the bunny's eyes. I'm going to draw the axis. And then finishing up the rest of the bunny's ears. So that whole process of laying that out, it took me about 20 minutes to get it laid out. And remember, you're only looking at the large shapes. Do not get into looking for the smaller shapes. All right, so now I'm zooming in on the face. And I wanted to show you how to lay out some of the basic shapes for the fur. So as I'm drawing some of the shapes that I see, you can see that I really zoomed in on my image. And I'm drawing those tufts of fur above his eye. As I'm drawing the tufts of fur, I'm aware that there's shapes of shadows between those, those little clumps of fur. So I'm really looking at the abstract shape of each of the tufts of fur, and also the shadows between them. And when you're drawing this, it's so abstract, it should kind of remind you of drawing the shapes of the reflections, maybe of the water in the glass or the metallic area. But as you're drawing, the texture of fur, and you're really making these marks and going with the flow of the fur, thinking of the direction that the fur is growing. And with Arlo, I can clearly see sort of, these tufts of hair and the negative spaces between. Now, pretty soon what I'm doing is, and I think I did it at this point, I switched to a 3B pencil. Up to this point, I'd used an HB for the entire layout. And I did that so you could see it a lot easier. If you want to use an H for your layout, that's fine. So now with my 3B pencil, I'm just laying in, sort of blocking in some of the more noticeable strands of fur that I see, as well as the just some of the shapes of the shadows too. So I notice that the fur in the center of his nose kind of makes a part, and it comes out, in either direction on each side of the nose. And as I'm doing this, in order so I don't get too overwhelmed, I really just try to focus on basically on one area at a time. So I'm really not thinking about the entire drawing just right now. I'm again drawing right here. I'm just darkening up the eye a little bit. Okay, working on the whiskers, and I see these curved whiskers that are curving into the nose, and they have some shapes between them. Now, as you're working with fur, it's important not to make your marks too regular. So what that means is if you notice, the fur is going a certain direction and then you're just kind of going with the flow, keep referring back to your photo to see if there's any irregularities with the growth patterns in the fur. Otherwise, your animal isn't going to give the appearance of like a real animal. If the fur looks too regular, too like it's all growing in the same exact direction. So under his little snout there, I'm seeing some shapes of some shadows that I'm blocking in. Just getting a little darker under there. So that's kind of a big shape of a shadow I just wanted to block in. For me, when I'm working on this drawing, it's really impossible for me to just do a contour line drawing. And the reason is I'm really just seeing shapes of shadows between the tufts of the fur. And anyway, you can see me working on the eye there. Make sure your eyes have highlights. That's the light, sparkly part of the eye, the reflection in the eye. And then you'll probably see a pupil in the eye. Now in this photo, I really can't see the right eye on Arlo at all. So anyway, I'll get back to that in a minute. So in here, I'm just working on that, another section of the fur on his face. And on this side, I really kind of see two major sections of the fur, so I've divided that up right in there. And again, always, drawing in the direction that the fur is going. It's almost like as you're drawing, you're like kind of combing the fur. Here, I want to get that eye on the right darker, and I'm kind of mirroring the eye on the left in terms of where the highlight is. Here I stopped working on the eye, and I'm putting some of the dark shapes of the shadows between. Oh, there I go. So keeping a little reflection in there and then adding a darker pupil in about the same spot as the other eye, darkening up some of the shading there around the eye. Then I'm just laying in some value there for the nose. So that whole section of the head is a little bit, it's definitely in the shadow. So I'm blocking my shading there really quickly. Notice how my pencil is still going in that direction that the fur is growing. So again, I'm always looking for irregular shapes of shadows, differences between the different tufts of fur, and trying not to keep all the fur going in exactly the same direction so it looks more natural. And there, just adding a shadow there under his snout, underneath some of that fur.